Ali Bradley, thanks for joining us. Where are you today?
I am sitting on Levee Road here in Brownsville, which is pretty much the kind of epicenter right now of this crisis that we're experiencing, Brandi. There are more than 7,000 people in custody in the Rio Grande Valley, which is where Brownsville is.
So, what are you expecting over the next 48 hours?
Gosh, that's a tough question. I haven't been asked that. You know, I don't expect things to be good. I'll say that. I think it's going to be a total system failure from what I'm hearing from agents, from what I'm hearing from ICE intel. People are worried. I will say I've covered this for 2 years. I have not been worried for my safety, but this week I am. Um, I don't believe, I think it takes one person to be unruly. We've saw, chaos under the bridge at times in Del Rio in September of 21. So what will happen when we see thousands of people try to surge the border? We saw the crisis in 2019 when that caravan led by Irineo Mujica rushed the border, and that was chaos, and that was hard to really get a handle on. And now we're looking at, 29,000 people are in custody right now. There are hundreds of thousands of people over Matamoros and other areas just along the other side of the border. We've been seeing our coverage in El Paso and Juarez. And with that said, it's going to be a free for all. They all believe the border is going to be open on that day. We know it's not, but that's not what they're hearing. And the cartel has to control this messaging, Brandi, because if they have people who don't believe that they can get in, they don't make money. So they have to keep telling them, yes, we'll get you in and we'll get you there safely. And you can pay us this fee and we got you. They have to control that messaging, because if migrants lose hope that there's access to the country, they're not going to keep trying as adamantly as they are right now. And so with that open door that they think is going to be there, I just don't think it's going to be something that we're going to be able to handle. They have surged resources. Alejandro Mayorkas today just announced that they are surging thousands of resources to the southern border. Governor Greg Abbott surging tons of resources as well. We know he's sending more than 500 National Guard soldiers down here to be deployed. I saw a bus just show up with National Guard here. So it is all hands on deck. We're seeing DPS and National Guard actually stop migrants for one of the first times. I've never seen that happen, Brandi, where they're actually standing on the riverbanks. I retweeted a video from Todd Bensman on the Matamoros side, and DPS is lined up along the river and they're actually blocking them from coming in, which is, I have not seen that happen in this kind of wave of people we're seeing. So they are taking measures, to try to keep the border secure, but there's just going to be too many people. The reality is that, and it will subside, but it's going to be a wave for sure.
And you also said that Secretary Mayorkas has announced a new rule that will allow for the expulsion of migrants who don't take legal pathways and don't qualify for asylum. So essentially, is it a rule that just replaces Title 42, or what does the rule entail?
Well, what's really interesting is that should already be being enforced, right? That should already be enforced. That is a law on the books. That is what is supposed to be happening. And that is actually the rule that they unveiled in October to solely impact Venezuelan migrants. That was that rule. It was basically Title 42 with a new name and an app attached to it. They've expanded that to Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Cuban migrants. So you have those four groups now. Well, that to me seems like they're just expanding that, based to basically allow all countries to fall under that umbrella. You know what I mean? If they come in illegally without the proper documentation. But I had an interaction with Secretary Mayorkas while he was down here last week, because that was supposed to be applied to Venezuelan migrants. And I had met several Venezuelan migrants, and I would encourage anyone to go and look at the thread. Men who were actually returned to already across the border, went to Arizona, took an illegal train, hopped on a train, down to Matamoros and crossed there and got in. And now this guy's on his way to Austin. No, and he did not qualify for asylum. He told me he is an economic migrant, no family here, no reason to be here outside of working, Brandi. So I asked Mayorkas that, and he told me I was mistaken. So I'd really encourage you guys to go and look at that thread, because I talked to several single adult men from Venezuela who have been let into the country under, quote, removal proceedings. And I think we need to get into that, Brandi, because Title 8 is what they're really leaning on here. Title 8 is in place right now. It's not being enforced because we don't have the capacity to hold these people while they wait their asylum claims. So yes, it's a great idea. But when you close detention facilities left and right, and you empty out these facilities and don't allow detention, They're going to be released into the country. They're going to wait for a court date 2 to 5, 10 years. We know the backlog is extreme. So they're saying Title 8 will be in place, but it's going to be a lot of more of the same of what we're experiencing and have been over the last 2 years, because Title 8 has been in place for the last 2 years.
You mentioned almost 30,000 people in custody right now. I assume that's all across the southern border and all the sectors. But when you say in custody, what does that mean? And where are they being held, if they are being held?
Yeah, there's different processing facilities across the southern border where these folks are able to be detained for a short amount of time. Most facilities will only hold people for 72 hours, and that is during that intake processing time. That is not where they're being detained awaiting their court cases. They are not being detained by ICE right now awaiting court cases. Now, ICE does have about 30,000 people in their custody, which is normal for a year-round time. ICE tells me that they hover around 30,000 in custody all the time, and that is detention facilities throughout the United States, Brandi. But when it comes to CBP custody, right now we're talking about the Border Patrol apprehensions and encounters, as well as the Office of Field Operations, which might be people that are catching the evading, people that are running, things like that, that are not necessarily right along the southern border sectors. What I am being told, though, is the northern and coastal sectors were initially kind of bracing for deployments to the southern border, but they're telling me that they are still just virtually processing right now, helping remotely. They don't anticipate deployments to the southern border. And this is what's interesting. They say that normally they would be deployed around 18,000 in capacity, but they believe that because they anticipate surges across the nation, that they're needed in the northern and coastal sectors as well, because inevitably people will be trying to breach those sectors as well.
So you mentioned, the thousands and thousands of people who have been intervened or turned themselves over to Border Patrol. One of the things that we know from the conversations that we've had with you on the show is that there are also, in addition to that, untold numbers of people who disappear into the interior of the country, and they're, I think you call them godaways. Do we have any idea, just in the past few days, how many of these known godaways there have been?
No, and here's another kind of issue with the Godaway reporting. So these gotaways, they're people that are evading law enforcement. And the way that they're counted is they're seen on a camera or they're seen in a bailout and they're not apprehended. A bailout is these pursuits where the drivers pull over, doors open, and everybody flies out into the brush. We've seen those videos a million times. Well, that's how they count these gotaways. And right now, Brandi, we don't have a lot of people in the field to track said gotaways. So we don't have really accurate numbers. And we've also removed a lot of the aerostat balloons. We only have 4 left out of 12 that were originally in the air that actually were documenting people evading. So the numbers I fear, aren't going to be very accurate on the gotaways for the weeks that we are experiencing right now. I'll do my best to get that data, but I think it is going to be very skewed because we don't have the same amount of people tracking those numbers that we normally would.
Yeah, you only know what you know. And on top of that, there are people who aren't caught on camera who get into the country. And so it's just this really hard thing, I think, to pinpoint an exact number or even a rough estimate. Ali, when we talk about National Guard troops showing up at the border, Mayorkas is saying, oh, we're putting this new rule, which you're saying is just really an existing rule, into place to get people out of the country who try to come here. I think a lot of people watching would be like, why aren't we already doing all those things? Because you've been down there for 2 years, and it's because there's already been a crisis at the southern border. So yes, we're anticipating the next 2 days to be really, really bad. But I guess why weren't they throwing the kitchen sink at it for the last at least year and a half?
Mayorkas still won't call this a crisis, Brandi, but I think that across the board, everybody agrees it is a humanitarian crisis. And it's shocking to me that they're not at least acknowledging it as that. And the fact of the matter is this: people that are coming to our southern border have a right to claim asylum. The problem is the messaging that most of these folks we know don't qualify for asylum. 99.9% of people I'm talking to right now are economic asylum seekers, and they know that they don't qualify, but they're still here to try. So when you look at like the humanitarian side of this, right, and you say everybody deserves a chance, they do, but we don't have the resources in place to actually properly vet these people. And that's why we're here, right? That's why we have a 2-year, 5-year, 10-year court backlog, that these people are placed into removal proceedings, and they're here for that much time, and they establish lives here. They have children. They live a normal life here while they're waiting for that court proceeding. And then how do you remove them after that? So it's a big mess, Brandi. And we, are here at this juncture because of how many people have been let in. And it is because of the humanitarian aspect that we have let them in, right? It is allow them to seek asylum. If they have credible fear, allow them to claim that. The problem is we don't have adequate resources to sit down with these people and say, is their fear credible? So they end up in these proceedings that take years. And then it ends up being a humanitarian crisis in a different area, which we're seeing the homeless crisis explode, right? Most of these folks are kicked out into the middle of the country without, excuse my language, my mom always says it's without a pot to piss in, right? You don't have any option. And they honestly believe that most people in our country speak Spanish. They're greeted here in Spanish. Their intake proceedings are in Spanish. Everything that they go through is a welcoming kind of environment at the border, and then they're kicked out into the interior and don't have anything. And so it is contributing to this humanitarian crisis we're watching unfold, and it inevitably will continue. But the reason why we're here, is because we didn't surge resources to the border. We didn't take this seriously when we started sounding the alarm 2 years ago. We didn't say there's a little bit of a problem, and then they say, okay, we need to hire more asylum officers than now. I don't know what the reason is, what the logic is behind this. I don't know the conspiracy theories behind why they're allowing all these folks in, Brandi. But the fact of the matter is it is happening, and it will affect all of us, in some way, shape, or form, because you can't have 6.2 million people encountered in 2 years, and have, even if we say half of those people were admitted in or are in our country right now, that changes the landscape of a population. It doesn't matter. I mean, you look at Brownsville, Texas, it's a tiny community. They're basically experiencing a new population every week. Yuma, same thing. They're experiencing a new population by the month. It's going to inevitably affect all of us, and we will see culture shifts and we will see things change. Now, how is America going to respond to that and receive that? That will be something interesting to see, Brandi. Because this is a very real situation, and this is something that is going to change the fabric of the nation. And we are a country of immigrants, right? But we also are, as Mayorkas said today, in the same breath, said we are also a nation of law and order. And, it doesn't really seem as though that is the case right now along the southern border.
Well, I think that's a good place to end. Ali, how can people watch your work and how can they follow along? Because I know you're very active in putting out videos on social.
Yeah, Twitter is the best place to find me. Ali Bradley TV on Twitter is going to be the best place. I kick things out really quickly there. Obviously, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as well, but most of my coverage is going to be on newsnationnow.com, so you can head there. Also follow along on their Twitter as well. We have boots on the ground in El Paso. We also are sending someone, deploying them to Yuma. So we will have the full southern border covered at News Nation. So I hope you guys follow along.
Yeah, and please be safe, because you've been in some prickly situations down there, and you've never told me personally that you felt in danger. So when I hear you say that you are worried for your safety over the next 48 hours, makes my heart sink into my stomach a little bit. So please be safe out there.
Thanks, Brandi. That's what I'm hearing. I guess I don't know if it's ignorance or bravery, but it's starting to feel a little bit different down here.